Imagine a world where the stories of Africa's greatest empires were never told. For centuries, African history was shaped not by its own people, but by outsiders who saw it through a lens of colonialism and conquest. But in 1966, something extraordinary happened. Senegalese filmmaker Ousmane Sembène released L'Untold, or Black Girl, the first feature film made by an African director. This marked the beginning of a revolution. A revolution to reclaim Africa's history, not through the eyes of colonizers, but through the voices of Africans themselves. This is the story of African empire cinema, a movement that has reshaped how the world sees Africa's past, present, and future. Our story begins in 1896, when the Lumiere brothers brought cinema to Africa for the first time. Their films were screened in Alexandria, Cairo, Tunis, and Libya, introducing the continent to a new medium of storytelling. But these early screenings were not about African stories. They were about Europe's vision of Africa, often portraying it as a land of savagery and backwardness. It wasn't until 1905 that an indigenous African voice emerged. Albert Samama Chikali, a Tunisian filmmaker, began screening his own documentaries in the Casino of Tunis. These early efforts were groundbreaking, but they were just the beginning. The real turning point came in 1927 with the release of Leila, Egypt's first feature film. Directed by Stephen Rusty and Widad Ofi, and produced by Aziza Amir, Leila marked the start of Egypt's golden age of cinema. For the next 3 decades, Egypt dominated African filmmaking, producing classics like Youssef Chahine Cairo Station. But even as Egyptian cinema flourished, much of the rest of Africa remained silenced. In 1934, the Laval Decree prohibited Africans in French colonies from making their own films. This law was a clear attempt to suppress African voices and maintain colonial control over the narrative. It wasn't until the 1960s, as African nations began gaining independence, that filmmakers like Ousmane Sembène could finally break free. Sembène, often called the father of African cinema, began his career as a novelist. But he quickly realized that film could reach a wider audience than books, especially in a continent where literacy rates were low. His 1966 film L'Untold was a groundbreaking achievement, not just because it was the first African feature, but because it told a deeply personal story of African identity and struggle. Sembène's work inspired a new generation of filmmakers who saw cinema as a tool for social change and cultural preservation. In the 1970s, filmmakers began tackling the history of transatlantic slavery from African perspectives, a decade before the global slavery film boom. These films were not just about reclaiming history, they were about reclaiming identity. Fast forward to the 21st century, and African cinema is thriving like never before. Films like The Woman King and African Queens, Njinga have brought the stories of African empires to a global audience. But this success has not been without controversy. Critics argue that films like The Woman King prioritize dramatic effect over historical accuracy, leading to debates about authenticity. Yet, despite these challenges, African filmmakers continue to push boundaries. They are not just telling stories, they are reshaping how the world sees Africa. From the Dahomey Empire to the Kingdom of Congo, these films remind us that African history is rich, complex, and deeply human. As we look to the future, one thing is clear: African cinema is more than just a genre. It is a movement, a revolution, and a testament to the power of storytelling.